I always thought the worst thing I'd find in the ground was a body. I never expected to find evidence someone was still using the pit. They flew me out to Wyoming to consult on a private excavation. It wasn't unusual. Some rancher hits something old while digging fence posts, calls the local college, and before long, I'm packed into a pickup truck eating granola bars and breathing in centuries of dust. The team was small, just 4 of us. Jeremy, the guy who made the call, was a paleontology PhD who got permission to expand the dig after uncovering some fragmentary bone. The rest were grad students, quiet, methodical, exactly the kind of people you want when working in silence under a punishing sun. The site itself was nestled into the side of a shallow hill, nothing but badland shrubs and dirt clods as far as you could see. No buildings. No birdsong. Just wind and heat and old ground. On day 3, I uncovered something I couldn't explain. We were clearing a section near what we thought was an animal grave. Bones were everywhere, deer, cattle, even a few coyote skeletons. But as I brushed back a layer of dry clay, my brush snagged on something soft. Soft. I froze. Nothing in a fossil dig should feel soft. I cleared the area more carefully. At first I thought it was fabric, but no. Leather. Very worn, torn along the edge. And underneath it, a buckle. Modern. Steel. I called Jeremy over. He knelt, poked at it, and muttered, "Could be a hunter's bag buried by flood debris?" But it wasn't. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became. This was a jacket. Attached to a body. The bones were intact. Human. Male, judging by the jaw and pelvis. He wasn't ancient. Jeans, a nylon belt, a flannel shirt barely surviving the soil's rot. He'd probably been down there 5, maybe 6 years. Too recent for our interests. We marked it and called the sheriff, like we're supposed to. That should have been the end of it. But that night, someone came back to the site. We were staying in a converted trailer about a mile from the pit. Cozy enough. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of our radio crackling. I sat up groggily, thinking someone had left it on. Then it clicked into focus, a voice, faint and distorted. "Stop. Stop digging." I shot out of bed. Jeremy was awake too, standing barefoot in the kitchenette, pale as hell. "You heard that?" I asked. He nodded. "Who the hell has our frequency?" We stayed up the rest of the night, listening, but it didn't happen again. The next morning, we returned to the pit, and found the caution tape torn down. The trench we'd opened was deeper. Not by much. Just a few inches shaved off the far edge. But we hadn't touched it. No footprints. No tire tracks. Just disturbed earth, quiet as ever. I felt it then, that deep, primitive sense that someone was watching. And then we found the second body. Not buried. Not fossilized. Fresh. Face down. Shirtless. Skin sunburned raw. And on his back, carved into the flesh like a brand, were the words, "You dig, you die." The sheriff showed up within the hour, a lean woman named Harlan with a permanent squint and a voice like a dry branch. She didn't ask many questions, just radioed for backup, sealed the site, and told us to stay put. We didn't. By sundown, the body was gone. Not moved by us. Not tagged and bagged. Gone. The sheriff swore it was still there when she left for lunch, left a deputy to guard it. But that deputy? Also missing? They found his radio buried in the shallow trench. Still on. The whole crew was shaken. Jeremy packed up that night. Just walked into the dark with his duffel, saying he was done chasing ghosts with shovels. I didn't blame him. But I couldn't leave, not yet. Not until I understood what we'd found. I stayed behind with Marcy, one of the grad students. She was tougher than the rest, barely 23 and already seasoned from field work in places that would make most people cry. She didn't talk much, just smoked constantly, and watched the horizon like it owed her something. That night, we heard the voice again. Clear this time. Not through the radio. Right outside the trailer. We killed the lights and pressed our faces to the thin window. Someone stood by the generator, no flashlight, no movement, just standing there. Marcy grabbed the hatchet we kept for chopping ice blocks and said, "We end this now." She threw open the trailer door, but the figure was already gone. No footsteps. No sound. Just a crumpled note on the generator, caught under a rock. It read, "You found him. Now he'll find you." The next day, I returned to the site alone. I don't know why. Maybe because it felt like the only honest thing left to do. The caution tape fluttered in the wind like something strangling itself. The trench looked deeper again. The dirt was disturbed, not by weather, not by animals. Someone was still digging. I stepped to the edge, peered down. Nothing moved. But the silence had weight now. Like the ground held its breath. I climbed in. Every archaeologist knows the feeling of a site giving up its secrets, layer by layer, the past whispering through dust and bone. But this was different. The soil hummed. Like a distant engine. My ears rang. Then I found the third body. No ID. Young woman. Buried face up. Eyes open. Mouth full of dirt. And a note pinned to her torn shirt with a piece of animal bone. "He watches through the earth. He buried himself to stay hidden." My chest went cold. I scrambled out, slipped, clawed at the wall, dirt in my throat. When I finally got out, I turned. And saw footprints. Not mine. Not Marcy's. Bare. Long-toed. Deep. Leading straight toward the trailer. When I got back, the door was wide open. Marcy was gone. No blood. No sign of struggle. Just her cigarette still burning in the ashtray. And written on the mirror in charcoal. "Diggers don't stop. They just get buried." That was 4 years ago. I never found her. Never found Jeremy either. The site was sealed. Officially, the deaths were chalked up to exposure, dehydration, desert disorientation. But they never found the bodies. Sometimes I wake up sweating, thinking I hear that whisper again through my radio. That voice that started it all. Stop digging. But I didn't. And now? Every time I step near an open grave, I swear I feel something watching me from beneath the soil. The door sealed behind me the moment I stepped inside. Not shut, sealed. No hinges. No gap. Just smooth, silent limestone where an opening had been seconds before. We were working in southern Turkey, excavating a site beneath a 4th century Byzantine chapel. The building itself was humble, collapsed roof, faded frescoes, walls blackened by time and moss. Nothing unusual. But underneath it? That was a different story. A sonar scan revealed voids beneath the chapel floor, empty pockets, too symmetrical to be natural. Cavities, maybe even chambers. Our sponsor, some European heritage foundation with too much money and not enough patience, gave us the green light to dig immediately. By day 4, we'd uncovered a circular stone plate embedded in the earth, 3 feet wide, carved with faint symbols like concentric rings. It reminded me of a manhole cover, but older, crude in texture but deliberate in placement. It took hours to loosen, but when we finally lifted it, a draft of cold, ancient air hissed up from the darkness below. A vertical shaft descended into pitch black. Not natural. It was lined with fitted stone, meaning someone built it. Someone wanted it to last. We rigged up a harness and dropped in one by one. I went second. The shaft was about 30 feet deep and opened into a chamber maybe 12 feet wide. My headlamp caught worn carvings on the walls, symbols again, abstract and crude, repeating like some kind of obsessive chant in stone. There were no remains. No artifacts. Just this impossible room and the overwhelming sense that it wasn't meant to be found. After a few hours of careful documentation, the rest of the team surfaced to get new equipment. I stayed behind. That's when the door closed. Not with a bang. No dramatic slam. Just gone. The shaft above me turned smooth as an eggshell. My radio went dead. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Some ancient mechanism I'd tripped. Maybe the rock had shifted. I shined my beam upward, No trace of the tunnel. I was inside a sealed stone egg. My breathing picked up fast. I tried calling out, pounding the wall. Nothing. My shouts bounced around the chamber like I was yelling inside a closed tomb, which, technically, I was. I told myself it had to be reversible. That the team would realize what happened and get me out. Then I turned and saw something I hadn't noticed before. A small alcove, no larger than a locker, had opened in the far wall. Like it had been waiting for me to be alone. Inside was a bundle of rags. No, not rags. Clothing. A jacket. Jeans. Hiking boots rotted through. Modern. And stuffed into the coat's front pocket, like a forgotten receipt, was a notebook. Weathered. Faded. The first page was torn, but what remained was scrawled in frantic handwriting. If you're reading this, you're already in it. The chamber seals for one. You don't get out unless something gets in. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't blink when the wall opens again. And for God's sake, don't follow the scratching. That's when I heard it. Scratch. Low. Deliberate. Coming from inside the wall. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I stood frozen, my breath fogging in the beam of my headlamp. The sound was rhythmic. Measured. Not like an animal clawing in panic, but like someone tapping to get my attention. The notebook trembled in my hands. I flipped to the next page. The writing was tighter now, like whoever wrote it had begun conserving space or time. There's more than one room. They shift. If the wall opens, it means something left, or something wants in. I backed toward the alcove, pressing against cold stone. My headlamp flickered once, twice, and I slammed it with my palm. It steadied. For now. Then, I swear this is true, a line split down the far wall. Stone shouldn't move like that. It was too precise, too seamless. But the slit widened, and something crept through. It wasn't a person. Not quite. I saw fingers first. Long, gray, too many joints. Then the edge of a face, pale and smooth, like old marble left to rot. No eyes. Just pits. The thing stepped through like it was part of the room, unfolding from the wall itself. I didn't breathe. Couldn't. It raised its hand, palm open, and placed it on the spot where the wall had split. Then it turned and looked directly at me. I say, looked, but it had no eyes. It felt like looking. Like its attention pressed into me, peeling something deeper than flesh. And then, just like that, it walked backward through the wall, and the seam closed behind it. Gone. No sound. No trace. Just that cold stone and the notebook shaking in my fingers. I didn't realize I was crying until my tears blurred the next line of writing. The rooms are bait. You're not here to find something. You're here to be found. I don't remember how long I was trapped down there. I kept reading. Kept listening. Sometimes I'd hear movement through the walls. Other times, whispers, faint, like a radio picking up a frequency just outside comprehension. It always came from different directions, as if the room itself was twisting while I stood still. Eventually, I slept. Hunger hollowed me out. I stopped counting time. Then, one day or a year later, the shaft was just back. No noise. No warning. Just open again. Sunlight poured in like mercy. I scrambled up without thinking, clawing at the stone like an animal. When I surfaced, the chapel was silent. But everything had changed. The excavation site? Gone. Gear? Gone. Even the shape of the landscape had shifted. Trees where there were none. The stone slabs cracked and overgrown. Like no one had been there in decades. I wandered for hours before a shepherd found me and called for help. I must have looked feral, sunken-eyed, filthy, clutching that half-rotted notebook like scripture. Back in Istanbul, they told me the dig had ended 12 years ago. The foundation funding it? Dissolved. Jeremy? Dead in a climbing accident in 2013. I shouldn't have survived. But I did. The doctors said trauma warped my memory. That I'd wandered the mountains for weeks. But they're wrong. I know where I was. I know what found me. And I know it's still down there, waiting for someone else to step inside. So if you ever find a sealed stone plate buried beneath an old chapel, walk away. Or at least, bring something you're willing to leave behind. We were cataloging bones in a burial trench when I reached for a femur, and recoiled. It was warm, still giving off body heat, like it had been buried minutes ago. I was consulting in Romania, helping catalog a mass grave uncovered during road expansion in the Carpathians. Normally these projects are slow, respectful, careful. You don't just dig up people and walk away. This trench, though? We didn't even get the usual warning signs. It started with locals refusing to come near. Superstitions, we thought. Old curses, whispers of Striga, and blood in the stones. I'd heard it all before. Half the world thinks the dead wake up if you dig too deep. But this wasn't mysticism. This was math. The bodies were stacked 12 deep, row on row, hundreds of them. Uniform positioning. No artifacts. No clothing. Just skeletal remains, piled with surgical precision. And every single skull had a hole. Clean. Perfectly circular. Like someone had drilled them, top center, dead middle. I remember crouching beside one trench with my assistant Mira, brushing away loose soil from a ribcage. We were cataloging femurs for analysis, simple osteometry, determining age and sex. Then I touched one. And flinched. "Don't touch that," I said out loud. But I already had. It was warm. Not just slightly, noticeably. The kind of warmth that said life. Mira laughed. "Sun's been brutal today. Maybe the soil heated it." I nodded, but inside I knew better. The bones above it had been cool to the touch. And this one had been buried deeper. Something was off. Later that evening, I stayed behind to finish notes, while the others packed up. The sun dipped low, casting everything in blood-orange light. The trench looked darker somehow, like it was holding the shadows in. I climbed down with my flashlight. There was one section we hadn't documented. A segment collapsed on itself. As I brushed dirt away from a partly exposed skull, my hand hit something smooth. Not bone. Plastic. I stopped breathing. Carefully, I excavated the area with a wooden spatula. And there it was. A latex glove. Buried under the bones. Not old. New. I pulled it out. And underneath it, tucked between two rib cages, was a knife. Surgical. Modern. Not a relic. Not ancient. Not even 20 years old. I stood there, crouched in the trench, feeling the weight of every answer collapse into one terrifying question. Who buried modern tools inside a grave no one was supposed to find? I radioed the surface. Static. Tried again. Nothing. Then came the noise. A low groan, like stone grinding against itself, echoed from beneath me. I aimed my flashlight down the trench and saw something that made my chest lock tight. One of the skulls, half cracked, drilled clean at the crown, was no longer facing up. It had turned. Slightly. Enough to be unmistakable. Enough to feel like it had seen me. I scrambled up from the trench so fast I slipped on the edge and tore my glove open. My palm split on the broken limestone, blood smearing across the rim of the pit. I didn't even feel it, just scrambled up the slope until I could breathe again. By the time I reached the trailer, the site was silent. Everyone was gone. No tire tracks. No gear. Just an open field and rows of shallow graves like mouths waiting to swallow something whole. I tried the satellite phone. Dead. Laptop? Wiped. The entire drive was blank, like it had never been used. There was no panic yet, just confusion. Until I saw the photos. A manila envelope sat on the cot inside the trailer. No name. No note. Just still warm photos inside. They were of me. In the trench. From behind. From above. From angles no one should have had. One was time-stamped, 15 minutes ago. My mouth went dry. My vision pulsed. I grabbed the envelope and ran to the tree-line. There was a ranger station about 2 miles through the woods. I knew the path. I'd walked it earlier that week. But I never made it that far. About halfway through the trees I saw her. Mira. She stood just off the trail, facing away from me. Still. Silent. I called out. She didn't move. When I got closer, I realized something was wrong. Her shirt was torn. Her hair caked with dust. And on her back, scratched into the skin like claw marks, were 4 perfect circles, lined in a diamond. The same configuration as the holes in the skulls. I stepped closer and whispered her name. She turned. And smiled. Not with relief. Not even recognition. Just delight. Like she'd found me. Then, in a voice too calm for the madness in her eyes, she said, "They're not bones. They're templates." And lunged at me. I ran. Didn't look back. Couldn't. My legs burned. Branches whipped my face. My lungs tore themselves apart. But I kept running until I reached a highway. A trucker pulled over when he saw me stumbling from the woods. Took me to the nearest police station. I told them everything. They sent officers. Found nothing. No trench. No bones. Not even the chapel ruins we'd been working from. Just flat, dry grassland. As if the earth had closed itself. Back home, I tried to forget. I left archaeology. Got a job in archival classification. Safe. Clean. Indoors. But I still get letters. No return address. Always typed. Each envelope contains a photograph of me. Sometimes brushing my teeth. Sometimes asleep in my bed. Sometimes walking home with groceries. Every photo has one thing in common. In the background, barely visible, a figure stands, wrapped in rotting fabric. Eyes turned to holes. Always smiling. And every time I try to report it, the letters stop. For a while. But they always come back. And I know one day soon, when I turn around, one of those smiling skulls will be mine. We were digging near a forgotten Civil War outpost when we hit wood. Not strange. What was strange was that the coffin was nailed shut from the inside. We were cataloging a low-priority site in rural Georgia, an old Confederate field hospital turned to rot and roots. Not glamorous work. Mostly rusted tools, broken glass, and the occasional belt buckle. But we were thorough. Always. It was day 16 when our shovel rang against timber. We were 3 feet down. Too shallow for a historical burial, we figured. Maybe a buried supply crate or storage chest. But when we brushed back the dirt and exposed the full shape, we froze. It was a coffin. Rectangular. Unmarked. No rot. No roots breaking through. Preserved somehow. The wood had darkened, warped just slightly, but the iron nails were still in place, unusual, but not impossible for this soil type. I ran gloved fingers across the lid. That's when I noticed it. The nails. Every single one was bent inward. Driven from inside the box. Must be vandalism, someone muttered. But no one believed that. We debated opening it. The university required documentation first, but there was no visible identification, no markings, no plate, no sign it belonged in a registered plot. And it was blocking the excavation grid. I argued against disturbing it. But I lost. We pried the lid. And immediately, the stench hit us. Not of decay. Not death. Bleach. The coffin was filled with white powder. Industrial preservative. And buried inside it, a person. Or what was left of one. Desiccated. Skin waxy, clinging to bone. Clothing modern. Jeans, a gray t-shirt. That alone shattered the theory of a historical burial. But the worst part. He wasn't laid down peacefully. He was curled up. Knees to chest. Fingertips bloodied. Nails torn off. He'd clawed the inside of the coffin until his fingers split open. We called the county sheriff. They roped off the dig site, took our statements, and promised to notify missing persons departments. Forensics dated the body to between 5 and 8 months ago. Cause of death? Exsanguination due to self-inflicted injuries. From inside the coffin. They told us the corpse had no ID. No fingerprints in the system. No match in any national database. The sheriff asked one last question before leaving. "Are you sure you didn't bury it?" That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing his face, distorted from the pressure, mouth frozen mid-scream. Sometime after 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. No words. Just a photo. It showed our dig site. Same angle we'd taken for our logbook. Except in the photo, the coffin was closed. And someone was standing beside it. Wearing a gray t-shirt. Curled fingers pointing at the camera. I didn't respond to the message. Just stared at it, heart thudding in my ears. The timestamp on the photo said 1:57 a.m. We had security cams at the dig site, cheap motion-triggered ones mounted to trees. I drove out there at dawn, still in last night's clothes, hands shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. The gate wasn't locked anymore. When I got to the trench, the coffin was gone. Not reburied. Not shifted. Just vanished. Like someone had pulled it out of the ground without disturbing a grain of dirt. I reviewed the footage on my tablet. The camera had activated at 1:53 a.m. The video was only 11 seconds long. A figure walked into the frame. Blurry. Limping. Covered in white dust. Gray shirt hanging loose on its skeleton-thin frame. It stopped at the edge of the pit. Turned. Faced the camera. And raised one finger to its lips. Sure. Then static. I took the footage to the local sheriff. He watched it once, then a second time. He didn't speak for a while. Eventually, he asked if we'd opened anything else. Disturbed any other graves. I told him no. He nodded. "Then this isn't your fault," he said. But he didn't sound like he believed it. 3 days later, the first grad student disappeared. Marcus. Young guy. Quiet. Brilliant. He was supposed to be mapping soil density samples that morning. We found his equipment scattered near Trench B, but no sign of him. His GPS tracker was still on. The last ping? Right at the tree line. Where the figure had stood in the photo. We searched for hours. Dogs, drones, the whole thing. Nothing. Except this, a single, dirty fingernail, jammed into the bark of a pine tree. The university pulled the plug after that. Packed up the dig. Called it a tragic accident. I stayed behind. I shouldn't have. I had to know if Marcus ended up like the man in the coffin. I set motion detectors around the area. Trail cams. Even tied tripwire bells like we were warding off wildlife. That night, around 3:12 a.m., they all went off at once. I didn't wait. I ran out with my flashlight and a GoPro strapped to my chest, praying I'd catch something. Anything. But when I reached the clearing, there was only a fresh mound of earth. Roughly coffin-shaped. And stuck in the top like a flower? Marcus's ID badge. I dropped to my knees and dug. I had to. My hands were raw within minutes. Soil under my nails. Breathing like a madman. I found wood again. New. Untreated. Splintering under my fingers. And on top of the lid, someone had carved a single word. Open. I didn't. I ran. I ran until sunrise. I left everything behind. I don't even remember driving to the airport. That was 2 years ago. But yesterday, I got a package. No return address. No postage. Inside was a photo. Of me, sleeping. On my nightstand, barely visible in the shot, was a bent iron nail. And beneath it, scrawled in faint graphite. You still haven't opened it. Beneath the ruins of an ancient fortress in Armenia, we discovered a maze of hand-dug tunnels. They weren't on any map. But someone had left fresh boot prints in the dust. We were excavating a late medieval structure carved into the side of a limestone cliff, one of those fortress monasteries that had protected villagers for centuries. It was remote, wind-chiseled, and so quiet that even your breath felt too loud. On day 11 we broke through. A section of the lower floor caved in unexpectedly, revealing a shaft that spiraled down into the rock. No records mentioned it. No blueprints. Just a void beneath centuries of stone. We cleared it carefully. Dropped a flare. It bounced once, then disappeared into darkness. Naturally, we lowered a camera. The feed was grainy, but clear enough to make out hallways. Narrow. Dug by hand. Lined with shallow niches like ancient lockers or shrines. And all across the floor, unmistakable. Footprints. Dozens of them. Recent. Human. Some deep, others lighter. Some crossing paths. Some circling back. They led in every direction. We told ourselves it was locals. Smugglers. Maybe looters. We'd heard of that happening before. But one thing didn't make sense. Every single print was heading into the tunnels. None came back. We descended the next morning, 4 of us, plus our guide Armin. The air changed the moment we passed the 3rd level down. It got cold, but not just in temperature, like the kind of cold you feel in your jaw and behind your eyes. The rock absorbed sound. Every footstep vanished into the stone. We marked our trail as we moved, chalk lines, glow sticks, even a spool of orange filament tied to the entrance stairwell. After an hour, the tunnels opened into a chamber. Stone benches carved into the wall. Scorch marks from ancient torches. And on the far side, a doorway. No frame. No door. Just a passage carved deeper into the dark. Above it, something was scratched into the stone. Not carved, scratched. Repeatedly. Frantic and shallow. Armin translated for us. His voice barely a whisper. They speak through stone. They wear our feet. No one said anything for a while after that. We explored further. The tunnel narrowed, winding like intestines. At one point, we found a bundle of rags stuffed into a wall niche, modern clothes, torn and crusted with what I hope was mud. The flashlight beam caught something in the fabric. A phone. Battery dead. Cracked screen. I slipped it into my bag. 10 minutes later, the chalk marks disappeared. So did the filament. We'd been watching it spool behind us, bright orange, clear as day. And suddenly, gone. Just the cut end trailing behind my boot. I spun around. Where's the rest of the line? Nobody answered. Because right then, we heard something. A voice. Mimicking mine. Not exactly. But close enough to make my stomach twist. It echoed down the stone corridor, too far to place, repeating one of the jokes I'd told earlier in the day. Word for word. My voice. Except the laugh at the end? Wasn't mine. Armin drew his flashlight like a weapon and whispered. Backtrack. Now. We didn't argue. We retraced our steps, or tried to. But the corridors had changed. I'm telling you, they changed. Angles that didn't exist before. Junctions that weren't there. Our glow sticks were gone, our chalk markings rubbed off or smeared. And that filament? We never found it again. We moved in silence. Until someone called my name. Derek. Same tone. Same cadence. Same inflection. But it came from ahead of us. Where none of us had gone. I turned, and Armin grabbed my shoulder hard enough to bruise. Don't answer, he hissed. It wants you to answer. He didn't say who. He said it. At some point, we passed a wall where the dust had been disturbed. Smudged handprints. Barefoot tracks this time. Smaller than ours. Toddler-sized. One print stopped in the middle of the floor. And sank. Like the ground had softened and swallowed it whole. We didn't talk after that. Eventually, we found a staircase. Rough. Primitive. But going up. We took it. And up. And up. It spiraled far longer than it should have. We climbed until our legs went numb. At the top, we found another chamber. But not the one we'd come from. This one had walls covered in maps. Maps of tunnels. Maps of corridors that never ended. Some were drawn in ink. Others, smeared in something darker. But every single one included a circle. A central point. And marked in the margin of one, over and over again, was a word none of us knew how to read, except Armin. He whispered it like it burned his throat. The borrowed. What's that mean? I asked. He shook his head. Not what? Who? That's when we heard it again. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Too fast. Too close. Too wrong. We killed our lights. Held our breath. And in that perfect, suffocating black, someone walked past me. I felt the breeze against my cheek. Heard the scrape of skin on stone. But no one else had moved. Then, something pressed against my ear. A voice. Dry. Flat. We mapped your path too. I don't remember escaping. All I know is we woke up just inside the mouth of the first shaft. Face down. No gear. Armin's beard had streaks of gray that hadn't been there the day before. We never found the other three. Search teams went down the tunnels the following week. They said it was a dead-end system, collapsed centuries ago. No stairs. No maps. No chambers. Just rock. Solid and silent. Like nothing had ever been there. 2 months ago, I checked the dead phone I found in that rag bundle. It powered on. No contacts. No apps. Just one video on the camera roll. It showed someone's boots walking through a tunnel, flash cutting in and out. Stone walls. A narrow bend. Then the video froze. The final frame? My face. Mouth open. Eyes blank. Standing in a place I've never been. Yet somehow remember. And beneath it, one line of text. Next time, bring someone else to leave behind.